Now, back to the rest of the list. We got 5 more randoms here, plus Kaguya Season 3 at the very end. Honestly, a lot of these are shows that I might finish still. Like, a lot of these are shows that I'm still kind of hyped to get to. So let's see what we get next. Next is gonna be to ya Boy Kongming. Okay. This is another music one, so let's give it a go.
Alright, I just watched all of Ya Boy Kongming, which I believe is how it's supposed to be pronounced. It's spelled Kongming in the localized version for some reason, but I believe it's pronounced Kome based on what I've been hearing from the anime. And that was a really fucking fun time. That is a fun-ass show. I will admit, this was one of the shows, like one of the bigger shows from the season that I was kind of skeptical of because it has a trope that I typically don't like, which is this, like, historical period, fish out of water, out of time trope that I'm not particularly fond of. Can't really call any specific examples, but that's just the like, oh, wacky. I'm not a fan of the oh, wacky hijinks because he's from the past kind of thing. But thankfully, that show, the Kome, really doesn't do that at all. Like, outside of maybe like the first episode, like the first episode's really the only time that trope is even relevant, one could say, because a lot of that is the result of Kome being such a versatile and adaptable person. Now, I have absolutely no knowledge of Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which apparently is where Kome comes from, supposedly. Again, I have no idea about any of it, so I'm just guessing. I would certainly like to read it at some point. So, any, like, minor details that you would only get from knowing that, I'm not going to know anything about for this show. But it does really sell you on this guy being the person from that book, at least in the very general sense. You really get the sense that they are translating a character from an epic novel. Again, I'm just going off my vague understanding of what this book is. And he's a really fascinating character because he's a surprisingly humble character. Because I believe he was like the tactician for one of the major warlords during China's like unification period or whatever. So that makes him A, incredibly smart, B, incredibly wise, and C, very adaptable to any situation. And for this particular situation, he becomes the manager for a pop idol, or an up-and-coming music artist, I guess I should say. And that's a really fascinating situation to throw this kind of character into, because he's got, like, even without... They do a really good job of showing that he doesn't need to understand all the in and out technical aspects of modern day, but because he really understands human psychology really well, he understands deception really well, he understands how to move people to his cause. And as a manager, that is an indispensable talent to have when you're trying to get people to notice your up-and-coming artist. So, kind of brilliant that they managed to merge those two aspects of it. And for the most part, all of Kome's plans are both smart and believable in the modern day. Like, it really translates a lot of what I assume are key elements of Romance of the Three Kingdoms into more modern equivalents. And just it starts off with like the really small deceptive kind of stuff, like tricking people into staying in a venue instead of leaving. and then it just sort of evolves outwards from there. The only one where it felt like it was really like starting to stretch the limits of believability was in the final episode. That might be because it relied a lot more on the main characters and like their personal motivations as opposed to the will of the masses, I guess. So, and I have some minor critiques about how social media works in that final episode, but they are minor critiques about like how likes grow, about how organic versus artificial reach, paid likes, all of that stuff. But on the whole, I think it was still a pretty solid finale. Pretty emotional because it had the two Eiko, our up-and-coming singer, and her rival that she picked up at one point along the series, Nanami. It had a really good like come-together moment for them. So that was really fun. And that's another thing about the series is these characters are just so immensely fun and likable. Eiko is just this very, very bubbly and lovable personality, but also just not very secure with herself until like near the end of the series because she's never really had success with her music career until Kome came along. That's another thing about this series is it really hammers on the point of like all of the musicians here are talented. All of them have what it takes to go big. It's just a matter of marketing. And that is the really sad reality about a lot of music, is a lot of music that you will never hear is really good, but you're never going to hear it because it's just poorly marketed, or they just they're just not hopping on the right trends, or they're not produced well enough. Just all of the like outer aspects of it. Like the core is there for so many bands that are just really fun to listen to and often emotional and very resonant with an audience, but if you don't have the marketing aspect, you can't sell it. And that's kind of what like Nanami and her band Azalea's whole arc is kind of about. It's going at it entirely from the marketing perspective and almost shunning that core relatability, emotional aspect of it. And the way that it comes around at the end is kind of fun, although very corny and a little forced in certain areas. Again, the way it plays with social media and parasocial relationships and stuff is a little questionable, but it works. Yeah, and obviously Kome is such a incredibly likable and fascinating and smart character that I'm not going to say he carries the show because the whole cast is just really solid, but he is the heart of the show, as the title would imply. He is definitely the main draw for this show in terms of how he makes these big master 4D chess moves. And it was just really fun to see that. But yeah, all the other characters are really fun. Eiko is just super fun. Kabe, who is this like freestyle rapper. I wish they had incorporated him more into Eiko's songs. Maybe if we get a second season, I don't know if they announced the second season or not, maybe we'll see some of that, because I would have really liked to see that, because they really only do it like once in like a random like freestyle session. So I would like to see more of that, but his arc of just overcoming the absolute massive anxiety that he has with his even just mild amount of fame was very interesting to watch. Really liked him as a character. Again, I think the end of his arc needed a little bit more to it, but otherwise really solid stuff. And also, I gotta say, probably the best freestyle rap performance I've seen in an anime, with Kabe versus Kome in like episode, I don't know what episode that was. Sorry, I still got a cough. I think it was like episode 6 or something. But probably that's not a high bar to hit, because a lot of freestyle rap in anime is bad, like decisively bad. Pretty much just Zombieland Saga Episode 2 is the only one where I've seen where it's actually really kind of decent. I'm sure there's more that I just can't remember, but this one is definitely the best freestyle rap performance that I've seen in anime so far. And the music aspects of it are really interesting as well. It got me to care about a lot of genres that I don't particularly care for on the whole. I don't really give a shit about EDM, but the way that the way that they approach EDM in this and the general vibe of it was really fun and interesting. And also freestyle rap. I like rap, I guess. Like, I listen to Kendrick a lot, and I also listen to some more like undergroundish kind of stuff, like clipping. But I wouldn't say I'm a huge rap fan, but definitely freestyle I'm not particularly invested in. And this show definitely got me to care about it to some degree. So that's interesting. So that's definitely noteworthy. And God damn, I still have the COVID cough. This sucks. But I think that a lot of that is also due to just how well produced this show is, because this is a very solid production from PA Works, nonetheless, which is not a studio that I usually am like super hyped for, because normally, like with PA Works, they'll have like a really strong production for a show with some weird hiccups here and there, but normally I don't particularly care for the like stories of PA Works shows unless Jun Maeda is involved. Actually, that really only counts for Angel Beats, but you get what I'm saying. I mean, there are PA Works shows that I like Shirobako I'm a huge fan of, but normally PA Works is very much outside my general taste, but this is very much not the typical PA Works show. It's not slice of life by any means. It's very much a like comedy drama kind of series with music in it. I mean, it has slice of life elements, but it is not slice of life in the way that Aquatope is slice of life or Sakura Quest is slice of life. This feels very out of PA Works' wheelhouse in terms of genre, and they really knocked it out of the park. This is a very solid production. I wouldn't say it's a very bombastic production, aside from like a few key moments. Like there's some really cool tracking shots in the last couple episodes, but aside from that, it's not really a Sakuga fest, which I don't think you need for an anime to look good, because the fucking color design for the show is incredible. Just the general cinematography and framing is just very competent and very engaging. This is just a really solid production. And really, it didn't even have to rely on cute girls all that much, which is also unusual for a PA Works show. Like, it's pretty much just Eiko and Nanami are the cute girls for this show. And so it really just came out swinging with a really fucking solid production. Honestly, but both Kome and Eiko have kind of iconic designs. They're just really, really strong designs for the series, and I dig it. This was a fucking good show. Again, I don't know if they announced the second season or not. I would definitely be down for more of this. That was good shit.
Alright, ya boy Kongming is done. And we're going to go pretty well towards the top of this list. Drop it right in here in the top 5 for... Stop it, Google. In the top 5 for the year. And we're going to give that a decent 8. Really, really liked that show. Now, we're down to 4 randoms left, plus Kaguya. Let's see what we get next, it is 4. In the Heart of Kunoichi Tsubaki. This is from the same author as Takagi-san. So let's give it a go.
You know, I gotta admit, that's a lot of production effort being poured into a fundamentally unfunny series. So I watched the first episode of In the Heart of Kunoichi Tsubaki, and that was lame. It's really the only word I have to describe it is lame. The humor is so lame, and also doesn't make much sense. Like, the writers must be FMA fans because they have precisely one joke. And that joke is, men are mysterious and weird. Now, again, I've only seen the first episode, so I can't say that the entire series is like that, but I'm going to bet that most of the series is like that. Because the vast majority of the jokes in this episode are about that, repeated, ad nauseum, without even a punchline, really. Like, it just sort of goes on. It's like, oh, men are stinky. They don't bathe. They're ugly. If you hit them in the crotch, they go down. And they say this, like, 5 to 6 times just in this first episode. And it's really not funny whatsoever. And the other jokes that it does have aren't particularly funny either. The very few other jokes that it does have are extremely forced Yuri, and one of the other characters is just dumb. That's it. That's the show, at least based on this first episode. And again, it's kind of a shame because production value's really high. For a comedy, it's a pretty damn good looking show. Really, really strong character models, nice color design. Compositing could be a little better, but on the whole, it's a good looking show. And especially if you're into, I think his name's Yamamoto, the original author. If you're into his kind of character designs, again, this is from the creator of Takagi-san. So if you're into that kind of character designs, it's all that. All that is here. But it's so unfunny and boring that I just can't get invested in it. And also the premise doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, like, the girl ninjas and the boy ninjas are being trained separately. Nary the two shall meet. To the point where the girls haven't even seen a guy before, apparently. But it sparks this almost sexual interest in Tsubaki. Like, the visual imagery is very obviously coded romantic/sexual. Even if it's not directly stated that way in the show, that's what is implied. And, like, whole thing is she wants to see a man because reasons. But the fact that she has not seen them at all before, ever, would not create this kind of vibe within her. It's like, she hasn't even seen pictures of them as far as I can tell. So they might as well just be a different species to them. Like, they don't even know what men do, apparently. I don't get it. I know this isn't a particularly popular show, but I just don't get it. Why? Vary the humor up somewhat. I know. I'm not gonna call Yamamoto I think that's his name. I'm not gonna call him a one-trick author with each of his works, but most of his works are kind of centered around one kind of gag. Takagi-san is the obvious example of that. And again, there are other jokes in Takagi-san, but it is primarily centered around the particular gag of Takagi teasing Nishikata. And if you're not into that, you won't be into Takagi-san. Now, I am into that because I think it's genuinely funny the way that they go about it. And I think those two characters have really good chemistry with each other. The joke in this show is fundamentally unfunny, and the characters really don't have chemistry with each other. It's just not fun to watch at all. So, let's move on.
Alright, Kunoichi, Tsubaki, off the list. Closing in on the end. Let's see what's next. 3. Black Rock Shooter Dawnfall. I've heard pretty much nothing about this one because Disney Plus grabbed the license for it, so nobody's been watching it. But let's see how it goes.
You ever see like an establishing shot in an anime and then know immediately that you're in for some not great CG? Yeah, that. So I watched about 4 minutes of Black Rock Shooter Dawnfall, and that's all I needed to see. I would say I'm curious about what's actually happening, but I'm not. I'm not curious about what this show is about. It completely cut me off at the knees on that by just dumping the world building in the most illegible text possible in about 10 seconds. And it's not particularly interesting from what I gleaned from it. Standard post-apocalyptic world with weird cyborg bugs wiping out humanity. And I don't care. There's nothing in this that makes me care at all. Like, it really does not try to set up this world at all for you in any way. It's just really bland and uninteresting. And the CG fight sequences, well, the CG everything is bad looking, but the CG fight sequences are just kind of boring. They're not directed particularly well. There's no punch to any of the attacks at all. It feels like it's happening inside a computer, so it's not particularly fun to watch, and it's not really all that good looking. Most of the designs look like shit. Now, if these are based on the original Black Rock Shooter designs, then I guess I have no desire to go back and watch anything for Black Rock Shooter. I know this is some very weird cult legacy property in anime that has had like multiple iterations over the years. This is not a good one. Just don't bother. There's nothing here. It sucks.
Alright. Goodbye, Black Rock Shooter. Let's see what we roll next. I mean, it's going to be one of two. Either number 1 or number 2. It is number 1. So, Estab Life, Great Escape. I have no clue what this is. It sounds isekai-ish. Let's see if I'm right.
Well, that was fucking insane. I watched about 7 episodes of Estab Life, Great Escape, which is a lot more than I thought I would. So this is a weird sci-fi thriller comedy by Polygon Pictures, apparently. I didn't even know they were making something this season. I have a not particularly good history with this studio. I think they are on not the bottom rung of CG, full CG animation, but certainly towards the bottom. The only show I really finished from them was their first TV anime, which was Knights of Sidonia. And even that I didn't particularly care for. It took a very long time for Polygon Pictures to evolve out of the everything is gray and dull and boring aesthetic, which you can see very clearly in Knights of Sidonia and Ajin, which is probably their most famous work at this point, probably. But they've slowly been making strides towards making their animes, their CG stuff, not look like gray goop. Drifting Dragons from a couple... How long ago was that now? Was that last year or the year before? They did Drifting Dragons. I watched a couple episodes of that. It was fine, but nothing noteworthy. This one is probably the closest I've gotten to finishing a Polygon Pictures show since Knights of Sidonia. Because the CG is not awful. It's not great. It's certainly not like Orange standards or even like Sanzigen standards. But it's not awful because it's actually got a decent color palette. Not an amazing color palette. It's got sort of a very pastel, cotton candy-ish kind of palette to it that you see with a lot of anime of this nature. But it's not the worst thing ever. I will give it that much. What really hooked me about this anime is that it's just kind of fucking insane. Like, it really... The first, 4 episodes just really throw some absolute bonkers ideas at you. Like, the third the third episode is... So, West Ikebukuro is like this... I should probably explain what the fucking show is at this point. So, they haven't really explained the whole world building, which on one level is infuriating, but on also, they explain enough of it for the story to make sense. It's kind of implied that different wards of Tokyo have become their own, what they call clusters, their own mini countries, as it were. And travel between these clusters is strictly forbidden, often punishable by death, apparently. I'm sure there is some underlying political implication to that. But, basically, the premise of the show is there's these people called extractors, where when people want to run away from their former life, they can extract you to a different ward of Tokyo. And it's got an interesting, nice little thematic premise to it. There's sort of this underlying message of, as long as you're alive, you can run away and start over. So that's a nice little, I guess, message to it. A little oversimplified, but I think it's got the right heart behind it. It's got the right feeling behind it. As long, you don't have to be stuck in your situation forever. You can make the change and do something else. I like that idea. And that leads to some really fucking insane premises. So, as I was saying before, West Ikebukuro and East Ikebukuro seem to be divided by this near impenetrable line of constant trains that just mow people over who try to pass it. And West Ikebukuro is this hyper-capitalist place, and East Ikebukuro is just full-on communism. Red stars and classic Soviet Union shit and all. And they're, for some reason, it's all penguins, or at least the East Ikebukuro is all penguins, and there's a ballet troupe that wants to escape to West Ikebukuro because the communist regime is suppressing their freedom of speech. Again, this is being done with penguins, and it's insane and over the top and really fun. And then episode 4 has okay, so if you've seen what's it called? The heroine isekai, My Life as a Villainess, that one. If you've seen that one, the main character Katarina has sort of multiple in her head segments where it's a bunch of different aspects of her personality deliberating what she should do next. So imagine that, but expand it to a full parliament of delegates. Part of one side is the moderates, so the LDP in Japan, who just want to cruise along and do things as usual. And then there's the extremist faction on the other side, that wants to sexually assault the main character. And also, this person's head that they are in is a slime girl. Wild. And the way it's executed is so well done and bonkers and fun that it just got me hooked. Like, it's also a pretty decently directed show too. Like, the shot composition is really solid. Editing is really tight. There's some great comedic timing going on. The way that jokes play out, especially I think in episode 6, I think. Whichever one where the main character is... Yeah, I think it's episode 6 where the main character is sick and the rest of her crew has to do an extraction by themselves and it goes horribly wrong. Like, the comedic timing in that for a certain segment is just really solid. So it's a very well put together show. But I guess what made me stop watching it, what made me just not care about it anymore is as the show goes on, it becomes really obvious that these characters are super one note and just kind of stick to their particular gags. These characters are not going to get fleshed out to any degree, it seems like, until we hit maybe like the last episode. Like, even the reveal at the end of episode 7 about a video clip from the main character's past doesn't change anything about her character. It's exactly in line with her character, and I don't really know why it made like why it was a big emotional moment for the other characters to learn this information. So ultimately the characters have just become kind of boring, and also the scenarios seem to be getting less insane as the story goes on, so that's kind of disappointing. The insanity really seemed to peak in episodes 3 and 4. So I would recommend the first 4 episodes of this show to you. Especially, I think it's really fortuitous that I watched this and Black Rock Shooter back to back with each other. Because it really shows how to do an in medias res action scene at the very start of a show. Like, the Black Rock Shooter one was just absolute nonsense from the get-go, and it didn't get any better from there. Whereas this one actually had a pretty solid opening scene that didn't immediately tell you everything. It only gave you the bare bones of what you need to understand what's going on. But it still was infinitely more enjoyable. So I guess expect an analysis video on that at some point, because it's so fucking weird and I just want to talk about it. But yeah, it's just a shame that these characters are kind of not interesting. So they can't really carry this show past those first 4 episodes. It's kind of unfortunate, but that's how it is. So I guess we just gotta move on.
Alright, Estab Life comes off the list, unfortunately. That brings us down to 2 shows. There's really no reason to go back to the randomizer at this point, so we're just going to do them in order like this, as planned. So up next we have The Executioner and Her Way of Life. This is the Yuri assassin show, I think. Let's see if it do good.
This is one of the few times I get to ring this bell and not immediately go into a tirade about an isekai that I hate. I just watched all of The Executioner and Her Way of Life, and man, that was a good-ass show. That was really damn fun, which kind of confused me at first because the MAL score for this was below a 7. Not that MAL scores are to be trusted, but not particularly common for for something to be below a 7 on MAL and actually be generally watchable. I am genuinely confused as to why this is so low, or at least I was. Now, I do have a theory on why it is, and I can't exactly prove it unless I do a deep dive into MAL reviews, which, Jesus Christ, no. But it has to do with the first episode, which is probably one of my favorite bait and switches that I've seen in a long time. So, this in isekai starts off with no-name schmuck getting summoned from Japan to this fantasy world, and he meets a cute girl with candy-colored hair that goes all the way down to here, very main girl-ish look, and you're just going through the motions of the isekai thing. He discovers what his power is, and then she stabs him in the fucking head. And then we find out that this isn't exactly a one-to-one comparison, so don't rip me to shreds for this one, but this is essentially what The Boys did for superheroes. This show is kinda doing for isekai. I wouldn't say it holds outright disdain for isekai, but it is certainly a reaction to isekai. Because while yes, there is one of the main duo of heroes is a girl summoned from another world, it's not really her story per se. Well, half of it is, but she's not the main character. This is much more of a... It's been a while since I watched this, so I can't say if it's exactly true. It's much more of a Familiar of Zero scenario, sort of, where Louise is much more of a main character in that than... is his name Sato? Maybe? I also might be remembering that wrong. It's been like well over half a decade since I've seen Familiar of Zero, so I could be just completely getting that wrong. But in any case, story is actually about about priestesses who are actually assassins slash executioners, as the title implies, who go after isekai people who come to this world, and they go out and kill them because every time someone gets summoned from Japan and comes to this fantasy world, they get granted this cool superpower, but every time they use that superpower, it chips away at their soul and they start to lose their humanity, and eventually they lose control of their powers and start just causing chaos everywhere. So it's up to these executioners to just go around killing isekai protagonists. So that is why I would say that this show doesn't have a particular reverence for isekai, which this is part of my theory as to why the score is so low on Mal, is because it really comes out the gate swinging and does not have a lot of kind things to say about isekai protagonists except for the main one. Like, it really... Like, there's definitely sympathy there for the protagonist, but it doesn't have a whole lot of good things to say about this concept. It is... people being isekai'd to this world is a net negative by far for this fantasy world. So, that's a very interesting take, in my opinion. And it leads to some really, really fascinating world building. And honestly, that's just probably the main appeal of this show, is that it is kind of flipping the isekai protagonist thing on its head in certain ways. I'm not going to throw around the D word. If you know what I'm talking about, I'm not using the D word. That's not what this is. That is not what this is about. It is not that. But it is definitely messing with the trope quite a bit, and I find that very interesting. And it also just comes up with some really cool power sets as a result. In particular, the second half of the show, when we find one of the main villains is, as the show calls her, Pandemonium, is basically just the embodiment of chaos, and she's got some really fucking cool power sets. And is legitimately just very terrifying. Like, she is just a very terrifying antagonist, while at the same time being just the right amount of edgy. Like, the right amount of edgy for it to be fun without it being annoying. I'm sure some people will find her annoying, but I thought she was an absolute blast with the way she frames things through the perspective of movies and fiction. Again, might be a bit of a dig against isekai in general. Who's to say? But it's just this world that they built, and the people in this world are so fascinating. And that's certainly the case with our main protagonists. We have Menno, who is our lead executioner lady. Well, not our lead executioner, but she is a executioner in this world. And she was, in the past, she was saved by another executioner from a near cataclysmic event caused by one of these isekai protagonists. And so she's basically devoted her life to killing these essentially potential monsters. But she's never really had to spend time with them at all. She feels sympathy for them. She feels like, poor you for being summoned to this world where I have to kill you. But until this particular instance with Akari, our other main protagonist, she's never really had to spend time with them. And we find out that she's got a bit, as the story goes on, she's got a bit of a soft side for Akari. She still wants to kill her by the end of this season, but it's much more so through the lens of, I don't want Akari to lose her soul, than it is, I don't want her to destroy the world. So it's a very interesting progression for her, and she's just generally really fun to watch. She's got this really cool attitude while she constantly keeps up this facade of being friends with Akari so that she can guide her towards a potential death solution, while still keeping Akari in the dark. Even though it turns out that, Akari has the power to, essentially, they're called pure concepts is what the power sets are called for the isekai protagonist. And her pure concept is control over time. So essentially, it's kind of like reverse ReZero. Whereas in ReZero, Subaru is the protagonist of the story, like the main protagonist. He's the one with the time powers, and every time he fails, time resets to a certain point. Instead, the one with the time powers is the secondary, like, deuteragonist, who, I'm just gonna say she's in love with Menno. They don't say it explicitly, or they don't say it. They throw the word love around a lot, and I would like it to be Yuri. I would very much like it to be Yuri, but it seems much more like a friendship kind of love. Just the way that it's phrased. I am willing to buy into arguments about her being very much in love with Menno. That would be cool. And she's kind of got it into her head that she wants, like, essentially we find out that she's just been, Menno has been dying over and over again as a result of trying to kill Akari due to a variety of different circumstances, and Akari has just been rewinding time constantly so that Menno can succeed, because she wants Menno to be the one to kill her, and she wants to spend as much time with Menno in this world as possible. And that's just cool. That is just, on the surface, really cool, and the way it's executed is really solid too. This is just a very fascinating world to dive into, with some really fun characters to act out these scenarios. And you know what? The production value is not too bad either. This is JC's staff show. I think they're slowly starting to recover from a really poor reputation that they gained in the back half of the 2010s, and maybe earlier this in the 2020s as well. It's not an amazing looking show. It has some compositing issues here and there. Sometimes the character designs get a little warpy, a little too simple, a little too simplified. And the action scenes are good, but they're not they're not particularly amazing, I would say, except for episode 10, which had some really fucking phenomenal cuts in it. But outside of that, the action scenes are good. I'm not saying they're bad by any stretch. They are good, but they're not like blow you away good. They're just they're like, this is pretty fun. I am enjoying myself. And a lot of that is due to some strong directorial choices, some really great pacing, really good like misdirection in the fights, and also very rarely uses CG. Like, I only caught 2 notable instances of it. One is in the entirety of the final episode because Pandemonium turns into this giganto centipede monster that would be impossible to animate for a TV series with this kind of time schedule that they have, presumably. And it's not the worst looking CG either, because the design is so fundamentally creepy and also cool that the CG just kind of adds to the, what's the word, the disgust of it all. The disturbance, I should say. Unease, that's the word I'm looking for. And just the design is just so inherently cool that it works. The other bit of CG that I directly noticed, and it was only for a brief second, and I actually have to applaud the show for this. It was a CG crowd shot, but I only barely noticed it because it's like a big train station full of people, and there's a bunch of CG people in it, but like the front 2 rows of people in terms of the camera were traditionally animated, like 2D. So they used those 2D animations to hide the CG animation behind it, and that's just a really cool idea in terms of like saving face for CG. So really gotta applaud it there. That was kind of brilliant in a way. But aside from that, just generally pretty okay production. Really solid character designs. The main character, Menno, is super fucking hot. Love that. I forgot to talk about Momo. Momo's here. She is Menno's like apprentice / aide. Most of the time, she kind of sucks. She's like that one really annoying girl from Railgun, I haven't seen Railgun, but she's the one who's constantly like overly attached to Misaka. Basically that, but with Menno. She's basically in love with Menno to this absolute senpai worship. And it gets really, really, really annoying to a lot of the time. But the function that she serves in the story as a counterbalance to Akari, in a sense, in that she's constantly worried that Menno is going to get attached to Akari and not want to kill her. And the way that that they have her portray that is very believable and makes sense. So I do appreciate her role in the story. And also episode 6, like, she loses a memento of Menno during battle, and it just makes her go fucking sicko mode. And admittedly, that was really fucking cool and kind of sad. So, yeah, for the most part, I don't like her. I should say this. I don't like her when she's around Menno, because she's just constantly just attached at the hip to her, constantly just throwing lavish praise at her, just really annoying. When she's not near Menno, she's fine. I will say that. And I do like her little rivalry with the princess character, the warrior princess that shows up throughout. Shit. Still have the COVID cough. Fuck. The rivalry that she has with the princess warrior character throughout the series. But yeah, really liked the executioner and her way of life. Do not pay attention to the male score. It's good. I suspect it's just salty isekai fans. Would definitely like a second season of this if it's to come. Especially if it's going to stay as creative with the concepts for power sets as it is. I don't need a second season, but I would appreciate one. That would be nice. So yeah, let's figure out where to put this on the list.
Alright. Executioner and Her Way of Life is finished. And we're going to move it all the way up here. We're going to put it right in here. Right between Precure and Love After World Domination. And you get a strong 7. Good show. Would recommend. Now, we're down to 1. We got... It's all down to Kaguya now. I am super fucking hyped for this. Let's fucking go.
Man, I'm not even sure what to say at this point. Well, I just finished, obviously, all of Kaguya-sama Ultra Romantic, the 3rd season of Kaguya-sama, and what else can I say other than peak? It's peak fiction, boys. Absolute pinnacle of the rom-com genre. It is just leaps and bounds better than anything I've seen from the anime rom-coms in my 10 years of hardcore anime watching. Better than Toradora, better than Chunibyo, better than just about anything else. Better than Karekano. It is the peak of this genre, man. It is so incredibly ambitious and fun and hilarious and just good vibes. It's just so fucking good. Where the fuck do I even start with this? Right out the gate, I was like gasping for air because of how hard I was laughing. Like, from the first gag of this show, it is just immediately immensely hilarious and just so clever in its timing and its wordplay and its visuals. The visuals are so off the wall, insane, and ambitious for a rom-com. Like, not that the standard should change across genre, but I mean, with anime rom-coms, we're so used to very standard visuals, very straightforward stuff. Obviously, there are exceptions and all that, but Kaguya just blows everything out of the water, from how it plays with the frame, how it plays with animation, how it plays with color and cinematography and blocking, and just literally everything is just so off the wall and fun and just so incredibly competent, more than competent, well above competent. In the past, this season I've talked a lot about what I call rainbow vomit, which is where anime will just sort of like throw a bunch of Technicolor bullshit on the screen to try and make it look interesting, but most of the anime that try to do that have no sense for color direction or color theory whatsoever. Kaguya-sama is so incredibly adept at color theory Like, you can see the building blocks of color theory in its particular brand of rainbow vomit, and it is so incredibly pleasing to the eye and so vibrant and cool and amazing. I will never get tired of looking at this anime. Every frame is a painting. It really is. It is so incredibly gorgeous and beautiful. Like, on top of the just sheer amount of ideas it has the technical competency to accomplish those ideas. This is such an incredibly competent and talented crew, and just a very healthy crew as well. Just so ambitious and able to accomplish that ambition. So much of the animation in this is fucking phenomenal. That final scene on the clock tower was just so beautifully shot. Probably one of the best uses of CG objects I've seen in a very long time, with all of those balloons. Just the texture for the CGs is so good that it doesn't even matter that I can tell that it's CG, because the lighting is so fucking perfect, and the cinematography makes it so, distracts you so much from the fact that it's CG that it doesn't even fucking factor into it. This is such an incredibly gorgeous anime, from the colors to the framing to the character designs. It's all perfect. And speaking of characters, holy shit, these are some of the best anime characters I've ever seen. I'm not even going to qualify it with best rom-com characters. These are some of the best anime characters I've ever seen. Fucking Shiragane's flashback episode was just so incredibly in character, but also very revealing about his motivations and how he first fell in love with Kaguya. It's so incredible. Just the way that all of these characters bounce off of each other constantly without even missing a beat. I am starting to see how some people might not like the characters in Kaguya in a very specific way, in that a lot of the humor is kind of mean, but it's not like hurtful mean. It's not like they are trying to hurt each other when they do these little jabs at each other's like weaknesses and personalities and stuff. Like, when I started thinking about it, like, my friend group kind of talks the same way a lot of the time. Like, we will take these like very hard jabs at each other sometimes, but we don't like fully mean it. We don't hate each other. And so I see a lot of my friend group in how the student council at this school interacts with each other. These are very good friends, and they just as often help each other as they do take jabs at each other. Like, the evolution of Ishigami and Ino's relationship as this series went on was just so very natural, but also incredibly fun and lively, and I loved it. Not to say that I hope that ship sails in particular. I know Ishigami's pursuing Tsubame right now, and that might take off somewhere. But I'm a very big fan of the enemies to lovers trope. I would like to see them succeed, and I think Akasaka has planted enough seeds for that to maybe be true, but we'll see. But speaking of all the relationship stuff, I do have to immediately say the Culture Festival arc is one of the best arcs in all of anime. Like, in all of anime and all manga, I'm just gonna say that. Like, this deserves to be talked about when you see, like, all these other, like, tier lists of, like, best shonen arcs, best seinen arcs. I want the Culture Festival to be discussed the same way that Chimera Ant is, the same way that Golden Age is, the same way that, like, all of these, like, landmark arcs in anime are talked about. The Culture Festival arc in this show deserves to be talked about the same way, because it is so immensely dense and complex while also being non-stop entertaining with a series of one-off skits that somehow mesh together perfectly. Everything builds on each other, even the lead up to the Culture Festival arc. That's the thing about this particular season of Kaguya-sama is, like, the first 2 seasons, it's mostly just episodic adventures. Like, the characters do grow over the course of both seasons, but the plot itself is mostly episodic until you get to, like, the finales. Not so in Season 3. Ultra Romantic is very much a lot more story-driven than the previous 2 arcs, which is kind of rare for a rom-com in general, but it pulls it off really fucking well. Just, like, the back half of this anime is one big Culture Festival arc, and it's so dense with different storylines going on at the same time that all end up interconnecting by the end of it, for the most part. Like, we've got Kaguya trying to plan out how she's going to confess to Shirogane, and Shirogane planning out his confession to Kaguya, and just all the different pieces that are, like, interwoven, like, all the different parts of Shirogane's plan are so well foreshadowed in earlier episodes. Like, some are pretty obvious, like, it's obviously it turns out that Shirogane is going to be the phantom thief that stole all the balloons and stuff. That part's pretty obvious, but all the more minor parts of the plan, like how it was him that submitted the request for the campfire, they really throw you off by making you think that Ino did it, but it turns out that he did it instead as part of his master plan, and so fucking good, and I love it, and just everything about the way this arc is interwoven together, it's so, I would need an hour to dissect all of the stuff in this arc, but it all is so perfect, and it all culminates in them finally getting together. And I will admit, I was a little concerned right at the very end that they were going to throw a wrench into it, but thankfully they saved it with the very last shot of this show. God, I just fucking love Kaguya-sama, and the idea, the main central theme of this anime is really starting to come out now. This idea that you just have to do it because someone else is going to come out and sweep your love interest out from under you if you don't make the confession. We see that with Kawashigi, I think her name is, and Maki. I don't remember some of these side character names, but that's the other thing. They also introduce so many side characters in this season. Not too many, but they introduce enough to make this even more dense without overloading it. That's another thing that some other rom-coms have issues with, where they'll front load like the first couple chapters with a bunch of brand new characters that you constantly have to keep track of, and then the audience eventually gets bored with. Kaguya is much more deliberate with how it introduces characters, and it really pays off in the end. And this immense drive to get to confess. Like, we finally have a reversal of the initial premise of the show. Like, we want to get the other person to confess, but it's finally gotten to the point where they realize, no, I have to confess, or else they'll slip away from me. And I'm very curious how the next season of this is going to play out, with Shirogane being accepted to Stanford well before he normally would be. He's graduating a year early, but now he's offered this to Kaguya to come with him, and we'll see how that plays out with her family, with her grades, with everything. Man, I fucking love this show. This is a 10 out of 10. It's fucking incredible. Just watch Kaguya-sama. I'm definitely going to make a video about this soon. I have to. It's just that fucking good. This is peak fiction.
Honestly, I could have kept rambling on and on about Kaguya for forever, but my camera battery started flashing low, so I had to cut it there. But yeah, I think it should be obvious at this point that Kaguya is peak, and it deserves to be right at the top here, and it gets a 10 out of 10. No need for lights, decents, or anything. It's a 10. It's just the peak. I would be very interested to see if anything from this year tops it. I'm not going to rule it out because there's a Made in Abyss sequel airing, but we'll see. But speaking of, it's already mid-August, and there's a lot of anime that are airing. So tune in next time for the seasonal wrap-up show, Summer 2022. My name is Ember, and I'll see you next time.